I am Berja by J.K. Divia.
We both just finished reading it, so we thought we'd do a quick video about it, tell everybody about it, tell everybody what we like about it, what's cool about it, and why they should pick up and read this quick, fun, little 90-page read.
And you might notice this little candle. That's not necessarily because we're doing a seance. This
Not today.
adorable little candle was given to us by J.K. Divia.
Yeah.
And we
she
were
sent
so
us
excited.
the book and the candle, and the candle's awesome because it smells like the forest, and it's not like a bad forest smell. Like some candles are really phony and shitty smelling, and this candle really smells like a Christmas tree.
Yeah. It brings the book to life, which I feel like is so much what we try to do with Wicked World.
Beautiful segue. A village built on ancient promise. A woman destined to run. The old ways are crumbling. Every spring, a new sacrifice is chosen. A spring maid, bred to seed the future of the village through a ritual before being led to the foreboding woods. But this season will mark the end of a barbaric tradition and the birth of something even more horrifying. There's a war coming, one of gods and giants. The spring maid has been chosen by a force far greater than her to be the mother of great warriors. Destiny has forged a path of bloodshed, and she is at the center of it all, willing or not. But she is no spring maid, no sacrifice to be made. She is Berja.
You have such a soothing voice for reading books. You should read me bedtime stories. Maybe for our next book.
Yeah, well, that'll be great. Coming to you live from the bedroom. Nobody needs that.
So, does the book deliver on this? I think, yeah.
I think the book delivers on everything it's promising to contain and a little bit more. I think there's some great subtle undertones and themes that she's playing with here that I really enjoyed.
There's definitely a theme that I didn't expect.
Mm-hmm.
And I won't give away what they are, but I will say the monsters brought in a different type of genre of horror I felt that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily didn't expect that, but it was like a pleasant surprise, and the way sort of the monster brigade is birthed, if you will, was
a little oopsies.
Was a little oopsie and a little interesting, and helped it reinforced, I think, the central theme of the book and Berja as a character, and I thought that was really well done by her. This is actually her second book. Mm-hmm. And her first book was called A Sea of Blood and Tears. And she has another book coming out in 2025 called Be Careful Where You Wander. You can find her on Insta. And I particularly liked something from her bio here in the back. So I just want to bring this up because she says, as a child, she was obsessed with world mythology, folklore, and ghost stories, which have influenced her writing. Very same. Yeah, she definitely belongs in the Wicked World with us.
That's true.
And this book definitely belongs there too. But I think what this book does really, really well is it does show that love and pays homage to those kinds of things that she grew up liking and loving. And her style here really, you can tell she loves mythology, and I felt really, I don't know why, but I'm drawn to mythology as well and that kind of thing, and particularly like Norse mythology I find really cool. Mm-hmm. And, I read this and I immediately wanted to start playing God of War again.
Yeah, right?
Just weirdly like that. There's just something about it that gets me, and I just, I vibe with it.
Yes, and I feel like this one, it's not just, a lot of Norse mythology is very brutal, which I love about it, but there's also, this is kind of more of a flowery feminine side of it as well. Mm-hmm. That I was gonna say, like I said to you earlier, it kind of reminded me of the Legend of the Sleeping Bear Dunes from northern Michigan.
Yeah.
So stories like that are kind of like, it's almost like a fairy tale.
A little bit, yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like a Grimm's fairy tale.
Yeah. Well, this definitely has fairy tale components, I think, just the way the story unfolds, and again, like kind of the themes and the lessons to be pulled from this about,
love and understanding, and
being a little bit of being careful what you wish for,
familial bonds.
And well, yeah, boy, her mother's a real peach. We don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but if you love books about mother-daughter relationships, Wow. Look out. This one's got it in spades.
Yeah, she's not the best mom.
No.
Or a mom really at all to her. Besides
really.
From giving birth to her.
Not really. I mean, technically that makes her a mother. But I mean, again, that gets back to another thing that is throughout the entire book, is this notion of what does motherhood mean? What does it have? What defines it? What is that maternal instinct? Because Berja, while not being a mother, eventually finds herself in a position of feeling motherly towards other characters in the book, and it's in stark opposition
contrast
to how her mom treated her. And it's an interesting dynamic that plays out throughout the book. And
I also think what was really interesting was there was this element of hypocrisy that you understand where it comes from, but there's this whole notion of us versus them. And like when she kind of takes on this role to say, well, I'm going to do better than they did before me. Like, I'm better than them.
I can fix this.
But they don't deserve it. They don't deserve this.
Right. She starts drawing lines.
Right. And in a way, she kind of starts falling into a pattern that's very similar to those that were before her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the big things that I caught a hold of was just sort of like this cyclical nature of, not cyclical in her storytelling, but cyclical in the environment, not in the environment either, but just historical cycles and things like that. And the book starts at the beginning and says, there's a cycle of, the Southmen have their cycle, the Northmen have their cycle, they're different. And Berja kind of goes through and is in the process of sort of like trying to break the wheel and break the cycle and build a new one. And, won't spoil it for anybody, but it works in some capacities and it doesn't work in others. And I think that's a fun thing that she's playing with throughout this book that it kind of gravitated toward and I enjoyed. Yeah,
absolutely.
So the last thing I wanted to mention really quick before we jump to a few quick questions was J.K. mentioned in somewhere either here or in another posting that we found that she wanted to write a book from the perspective of the monsters. And I think, with this book, she does that in a really interesting way. Berja becomes a monster of her own making in a way.
Right.
And she refuses to admit that she's the monster to a certain extent. And it's only sort of as she grows and learns and evolves at the very, very end that she can maybe understand and see that she was the monster and maybe she was starting to become a little bit of the problem she finally starts listening to other voices and hears other things and that changes, I think, a little bit of how she feels and how she is at the end of the story.
Yeah, and I think she is introspective enough to say, like for example, when some of her children come to her and say, like, we want to love other villagers that are not turned.
Right.
And she's kind of debating it, and she's like, well, if I don't do this, then I'm just as bad as the villagers were before me. So it's like she's introspective enough that she considers that. It's not like she's just oblivious.
Before the very first chapter, there is a passage that is called The Way of the Forest Gods. Once we lived in darkness, deep in caves not far from here. There was only one season, and it was one of death. That was before we followed the forest gods, before they showed us the way and the stone altar built. To receive the forest blessing, we must go through the seasons with it. We must offer up our own, the children of spring, or a child born of the forest gods, for blessings or blood.
Oh, blessings or blood. So it's like birth or death, basically.
Yeah.
This is a season of just death.
Yeah. I loved this as kind of like a little gateway primer to get you in. It kind of like sets the mood in a very specific way. And
I think after reading it, it makes a lot more sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. Like when I got to the end of this, I was like, you know what? There's one thing in particular I want to go back and read. So I got to the end, I finished it, and I went back and I reread the chapter called The Forest God. And having known where it was going and what it was doing, because I wanted to go back and see how all of those, again, without being too specific, because we want people to read this, because it is a really fun, quick read.
Yeah.
I really liked it. So I went back and read that, and it helped inform me a little bit more, and I was able to read that chapter with a little bit of a different slant, knowing where it ends, and the promises and the things that Berja, as she tries to become herself again, or tries to become herself free, what she is accepting, and it's
what she's willing to give up.
What she's willing to give up, right?
But before you read it, it sounds very like, all right, sets the tone.
Yeah.
But then after you read it, you read that passage again, and you're like, oh yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of little things that are subtly laid in here that if you went back and read it again, you'd be like, oh, there's a little nugget, there's a moment, and they'll just pique your interest a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were your favorite elements of this book? I guess we've been talking about it kind of.
Yeah, we've kind of been covering a lot of it, but I like the mythology side of it, the Norse mythology, and I like that I kept kind of guessing. There's the green-eyed friend, which is the name of this candle, but it's also a character in the book. I enjoyed the idea of trying to play through in my brain, like, who are these gods in particular in this world? I'm almost like this one, the raven that's kind of always talking to her and taunting her in a way.
Yeah, but I know that was something that I was like, why are you calling this guy your friend?
Right.
He's kind of an asshole.
Right. And that's another thing. Like when I finished, I wanted to go back to the beginning in a way, because I kind of have a feeling he's been there from the beginning, pushing her where he wants her to go, and that maybe her free will choices aren't as free as she thinks.
Right.
And that's
it's like, and how easy, like, she has had no communication with anyone, and then this crow is bringing her like little pieces to put together a little doll.
Yeah.
But maybe it's almost even like a voodoo doll.
Well,
and
the bird also brings her the berries, which end up helping to spring her free from her confines, right?
Or almost make her end up in a poor situation without giving anything away.
For sure.
I was really trying not to spill.
Yeah, no.
But which at the end of it, you realize like that actually could have been part of the plan too. I don't know.
Yeah. What did you like about it? What really stood out to you?
Yeah. I really liked the imagery of things, especially the monsters. I think any like feral creature is something that I am drawn to.
Yeah.
Just like imagining them snarling and like the carnage, like all of that I was really drawn to.
I really like that part where she describes.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Maybe we should bleep that out. It's not a spoiler per se, but it's a little inside pool toward the very end. Or
inside baseball, inside Berja.
Berja deep dive.
Yeah,
we'll do that next time.
Well, no, but I really liked that. I really liked the feeling of there's almost this like cozy feeling to reading a book that feels like a fairy tale to me. This does read a lot like a Grimm's fairy tale type of story. And it just reminded me so much of the Sleeping Bear Dunes, which was really nostalgic for me. Which, if you don't know, the Sleeping Bear Dunes are these dunes over Lake Michigan, and there's a whole story about a mother bear and her two cubs, and it's like the story of like how those dunes came to be.
Yeah.
And so.
And that the dunes are the mother and the kids. And the cubs.
The cubs, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a very nostalgic feeling for me. It like kind of took me back to reading about that and thinking about that, and that sense of wonder I think is really fun. If I were to think about who should read this book, I think that first of all, if you love folklore and like kind of fantasy, but not like high level fantasy. It's like a folklore fairy tale.
The better place to put it. Fairy tales, folklore, things like that.
Emotional. Not in like a corny way. Like like it's really emotional in terms of like.
It's not "Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret."
Yeah, it's very like the meaning of love and the meaning of self-acceptance.
Kind of final thoughts on Berja. I think we both enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we probably both would be rewarded with a second reading of it. Which,
right, and picking up on little nuggets here and there that I'm sure are
little berries,
interwoven.
Little berries that the green-eyed
right.
friend left
right.
for us.
Little flowers woven into the nest.
Put us on the path or off the path. That
yeah.
jerky bird.
That green-eyed bastard.
Yeah, I think he's the real villain here in the whole thing. But I like, one of the big things, other big things that I really liked about this was that, Berja at the beginning, you understand who she is. And this unfortunate, and that's putting it lightly, this horrific situation that she's put in to be the spring maid. And her refusal to accept that and to fight to escape. And I'm not spoiling too much because that happens early on in the book. But all of the choices that she then makes after that are choices that she makes of her own free will. And, I found that really kind of interesting and satisfying that, she will not, she says, there's one passage in the book where she says multiple times, I will not succumb. I will not succumb. I will not succumb. And not only does she not, but she also, chooses to try to thrive and to improve everything else. And it's a real mixed bag in the end about how successful she is.
Right.
But she stakes her claim and she goes for it.
And I thought you made a really good point when we were talking off camera about this a little bit. And you mentioned that I made the observation that I was like, man, it's kind of hard to tell that she, it seems like she doesn't even know what she wants to do. And you made the observation that, well, this is the first time in her life she's ever had the opportunity to make a decision.
Yeah.
So of course she's indecisive and trying to figure these things out, which I thought was a really good observation. And I think too, the fact that she then realizes she has a moment where she thinks back on her mother and she kind of, she has a moment of reflection where she goes, well, I guess I do understand why she did this. I can see from her perspective why she chose to do this.
Right.
But she still follows it up with, no, I'm going to do better than that. And ultimately, she still doesn't necessarily end up where she wanted to.
No.
No. So it's kind of an interesting story from the perspective of a mother as well, that it's you're gonna mess up. It's inevitable.
You're gonna make bad choices.
Right. You're not perfect.
Some of them are gonna go horrifically wrong and some of them are just gonna go meh wrong.
Yeah, and it's that sense of mothers and daughters. Not that her mother has an excuse for how she is.
No, she is.
But
oof.
There's also that theme of, it's a pretty normal thing, I think, for mothers and daughters to have that sense of, oh, I would never be like you. I'll never be like you. And then you're like, shit, I'm my mother. It just
we
happens.
All eventually in some way become partially our parents. It
it
is inevitable and it is cyclical too.
Right.
So, okay. Well, I think we both really like Berja.
Yeah,
and
we
would
really liked
recommend
it.
people to read it. And I will leave you with one final thought because this was the last passage that I kind of liked, and it's simple and quick and easy. But Berja at one point says, I used to think monsters only came with the darkness, but now I see that they come in the light just the same. Which I kind of dig. So
I like that too.
all you monsters out there, stay in the darkness, come out into the light. We can all be together.
Stay wicked.
Always stay wicked.